Hello and welcome to episode 28 of Eve Just Chatting. Today we are going to cover a special episode because tomorrow a book is going to launch on Amazon and I'm going to post links to that just tomorrow. It's called The Leadership Navigator. It's primarily written by Tracy-Ann Palmer and Stacey Caster. And it's actually a compilation of several authors who came together for that specific book to cover certain aspects of what it currently takes or what it takes in this day and age to become a good leader. However you want to actually define that, however you want to actually structure that. But that book is going to launch tomorrow. It's going to be available in different formats, so you can have a paperback version, Kindle version, and stuff like that. And we are hoping that it's going to be very useful for all those who are actually trying to find their leadership role or define their leadership role. So there is a bunch of different authors in there and a bunch of different topics which are going to be covered in there. And it's written in a way that you can actually participate in the book and just pick out the chapters which are relevant for you at that specific case or at that specific area. So the first two chapters, first one is written by Tracy-Ann Palmer herself. Second one comes from Stacey Caster. And all of these chapters basically combine a scenario where we talk a bit about a specific challenge you typically face as a leader in your specific role and how you might be able to overcome that and how you're actually going to be able to cover from that specifics. So the chapter which I actually brought into the book was around the topic which I covered already in several podcasts, and that is all around taking decisions. So it's going to be, I think, chapter 8 in the book. And chapter 8 is going to be all around taking a position and owning your decision. I think something which is very, very important in today's day and age as a leader, not only if you're becoming a leader at the top of the organization, but also already if you're becoming a team lead or something like that. Because it's important that your team knows that taking and owning a leadership or taking and owning a specific position or a specific decision is leaving not the team behind. So what we see in many corporations nowadays is people invite tons of people into meetings so that the decision is spread across many people. So while this looks like in many cases a very, let's say, democratic process, many leaders take this also as a great opportunity so that if in the end this scenario shows up as being the wrong decision, they can actually share this across everybody and say it like it was not my decision by itself, it was everybody else's decision. This leads to one specific result for many people, and that result is that companies are actually lacking the decision-taking process in the first place. So you have endless meetings again and again and again, and you can't actually come up with a good solution for it. And when you look at all of these different scenarios, the reason behind that is when you speak to people, for example, from Amazon who have a different approach on how to take decisions in the first place, then you see that groups are actually approaching this differently. Let me take an example which I also describe throughout the book. About last year, there is one conference, many of you know that Comdivision is, so my company Comdivision is pretty big in the VMware business. And end of August is globally the leading conference, VMware Explore, formerly known as VMworld. And it actually occurred that due to some family matters, there was a high chance that I couldn't attend the conference, but it was always on the way, whether or not. And so one of the things which I took on relatively early in the process was that I was actually looking into having to take a decision, how are we going to proceed with the conference. So as we didn't know if I would be able to take the leadership role for the conference, I actually turned around and changed the approach and decided together with some people from the leadership team that some other people should take the complete leadership for the conference, and we prepared everything for the case that I wouldn't be able to attend the conference. We could have clearly waited up until, let's say, 5-10 minutes or a few hours or a few days before the conference. But we felt like this would actually be a bad preparation for the team. So in the end, that is exactly what we took. We took an early decision and actually decided, let's just prepare everything for the case that I'm not going to be able to attend, and prepare the team and everybody so that everybody is ready to actually take over the responsibilities at the conference. We started to reschedule so that we have enough people in the room so that customers as well as vendors could actually get the necessary questions answered, and we could get everybody to the decision process we wanted to have. The conference for us is that important because for us in ComDivision, the US market is one of our leading markets globally. And so the conference is step one for typically the business for the next 12 to 18 months is for us. So it was important that everybody was spot on and we could actually tackle that. What we also did is we actually look at what can we do to prepare everybody the best we can and actually handle it. So as I covered that example, so what does a typical decision-making process look like, and what did I learn over all these years on how to best approach the decision-taking process in the first place? The first important part is to clearly identify the problem at hand. And this sounds very obvious, but it is not. Very often what I have seen in the past is that people were too focused on actually making it a fluffy cloud instead of really clearly identifying a problem and saying, okay, these are the key components which are currently bothering us and which are currently helping us or are actually causing us any issues. So the first thing is to identify the problem, give it a clear name, identify a clear name, and describe what it is all about. The second part is, once we have identified the problem, is that we need to collect the information around the problem. So all of the influencing factors around the problem need to be identified and clearly put on the table so that we can actually prepare a decision process. The third step in there is to identify alternatives. So typically, as soon as you identify the problem and as soon as you have collected the information, you are very quick tempted very quick to actually start taking a decision and actually coming up with a potential solution for it. So from a step-by-step perspective, the first step is identify the problem. Second step then is moving forward into collecting information, identify the alternatives. So whenever you have a problem at hand, the most one important part is actually weighing out what alternative solution would we have to actually cover for that specific scenario. And great. Yeah, so I was just informed there was audio missing on some streams. So identify the problem, collect the information, identify the alternatives. So once we have the alternatives, so let's say the problem is that we can't finish a product in time for a product launch. The second stage is now collecting the information. So how long would the product be delayed from a launch perspective? Another opportunity would be that it's not only the delay, what are the causes for it? So depending on what it is, if it is a soft product or a hard product, so if it's, for example, involving a production line, it is a far more complicated scenario from that perspective. And the third part out of it is actually, when you collect the information, is what else can we do? So identifying the alternatives. So one alternative would be we ship an unfinished product and try to finish the product in the end at the customer. This is, as we talk about software products, a very common approach where people actually take that step and identify specific scenarios. You let the customer actually get the software, call it out as a beta release, or potentially even call it out a finished release, something sadly enough many software vendors do, and then ship it out. This is easy as long as we are talking about a soft product. If we are talking about a hard facts product, that is not so easy from that perspective anymore, because you might not be able to finish it at the customer. A potential scenario which startups take is to evaluate a market is you make an announcement for a launch date. And then once that launch date happens and you know you're not finished in time, you're actually giving customers promises about something else, which might be wrong with the product. So those could be alternative solutions. Another alternative could be I'm going to delay the release of the product. So all of these are specific scenarios. The next thing is weigh the evidence. So when we weigh the evidence is we need to validate how good our information is. Is there anything we can change about the process or the problem solution? Or is there anything which we can actually do to improve the customer scenario out of it? The next step is then that we choose from the alternatives, because as we already identified, we either have the clear problem, we cannot actually ship the product in time for what's needed for our customers. Second is we have collected all the information about what are our options depending on what type of product we have. The next step is now what are we going to do with it? And then once we have identified the alternative is we are going to implement the actions. And then finally, we need to evaluate the results so that we can learn from it and actually potentially make a different approach for it for future scenarios. So let's come back and actually take this back to the problem we had at that conference last year. So during last year's key conference for us, I was not able, due to family matters, or there was the high chance that I would not be able to attend the conference. So that was the problem at hand we needed to cover for. Collecting the information, what would be the impact of me not attending the conference would be that we lose potential customer contracts because no one is taking care of the customers, that we could not establish the vendor relationships or strengthen the vendor relationships, and that there is a high risk of us actually losing potential revenue for the next 12 to 18 months. So what were the alternatives? So the alternatives is I could try to ignore the family matter, but in that specific case, that might not have been the option. Again, we weren't still sure, so the problem was just it could be that I will not be able to attend the conference. So one of the alternatives would be we could have waited until basically the start date of the conference, and at that start date of the conference, we would not be able to actually have me on stage or in the meeting rooms and all of these. So we changed that approach at that point. The other alternative would have been that I actually appoint 2 or 3 people of my team to actually take over specific parts of my role and actually run those specific sessions. The challenge we had at hand, it was that I was planned to be a speaker at the conference in different occasions, that I was a board member at different advisory boards and other things. So whilst it would have been potentially easy for me, normally I would have actually attended most of these events myself and then have a secondary or third person with me who would then actually take over and actually continue the customer conversations while I would be rushed to the next session or events. So as that was no longer possible, we actually changed our approach and actually said it's like, okay, we are going to assign 3 people who are going to take over all my jobs during the conference, plus potentially what has been their case. We weighed the evidence from a perspective that we actually looked at it as like, how much are we potentially going to lose? How much are we going to actually win out of it? And so we weighed the evidence and actually said, it's like, okay, there is a high chance he's not going to attend. The better we prepare for this, the better we prepare suppliers, the conference, and everybody else, it's easier for us to attend with this. So that would actually was the point where we started with step 5. We picked the clear alternative and said, it's like, okay, from now on, no matter what's going to happen, we are going to plan 100% for the case that I'm not going to attend the conference, and actually build all the action plans from that perspective. So no matter what would have happened, so even if for whatever reason I would have been able to attend the conference, we would have not changed plans. I would have potentially just showed up at some of the events or something else, but the primary scenario was that people would actually continue to run my sessions as planned. In the end, I was not able to run the conference, but the results were perfect because we could actually perfectly well prepare for the specific case. All of the people were perfectly well briefed, and every morning US time, because it was running at West Coast time, we were having briefing calls with everybody, prepared everybody, summed up the previous day. And to be honest, in the end, it was a far better conference than what we have expected out of it, because customers were prepared for it, vendors were prepared for it, and we actually, in the end, had a perfect outcome out of it. So as we have learned out of this, the important part is that you stick with your decision. This is also a very much a lesson learned if you read books, leadership books, for example, from Jeff Bezos. He talks a lot about the importance for Amazon on why it is so important within Amazon that they take decisions fast and then actually work with the consequences out of it, learn from the results, and then actually adopt for it. This is one of the key ingredients why Amazon over all these years and then later AWS were so successful, because they did never actually come into a scenario where they thought about a discussion point again and again and went in circles. They actually went ahead and actually took a decision, lived with the consequences, and it was no way a finger pointing. So I was actually watching a TED Talk the other day where someone actually listed up all the opportunities, or not opportunities, all the scenarios where Amazon actually opened up a specific branch or a scenario and later on closed it. If you watch through that list and if you see and hear all the millions of US dollars which were basically burned in these projects, you could clearly argue it's like this is completely an unsuccessful company. On the other side, we see how successful Amazon has grown over all these years. And one of the key factors for that is they always took decisions, revised it, and if they figured out, they also took the decision to shut it down very quickly again. And so this is an important part which is out of that. And what you will also see is that also within Amazon there is not that much of finger pointing from that perspective. So if someone or if a team in a leadership perspective actually takes the decision on something, then everybody works to it. When we look through what many other people currently do when they take a business decision from their perspective, is it's not only the fact that in many corporations nowadays it takes a very long time until people finally take a decision. It's also a challenge that many people do not ever actually take a decision at all. So even if there is a visible decision in the first place, they are still working on all the alternatives. And that is actually not helping from that perspective at all. Because when you watch the scenario that companies do not take decisions from that perspective, then it's where it comes up with a challenge. Because let's take again the example from the conference last year. If we would have not taken the decision out of that specific scenario and just actually constantly have always rephrased this like, yeah, but maybe he could come and maybe we could do that. It's having a clear line and actually marching forward is helping them. And the same, you can see that in Amazon in many cases. You can see this, how Elon Musk actually runs, whether it's Tesla, SpaceX, or even X, or formerly known Twitter. He takes decisions with the teams, and then they are working with that decision, and everybody is laser focused on that one specific decision and is not constantly questioning it. And that is the challenge which we see in so many different scenarios out of it. And this is actually what the chapter in the book is going to be about. It's actually all about what it takes to take a decision as a leader in a modern corporation, and actually then owning the leadership role from that specific perspective, and then working with that decision. And that also means that the whole team has to actually accept that decision and then actually work with that decision and not constantly question this. I see this on a daily basis also. We see this in our organization. No organization is perfect for that. But whenever we get together and actually take a decision and work with that decision towards a target, it's a much better outcome than if anybody is constantly actually questioning the decision. It's also something, when you take a look at it from a leadership perspective, it's potentially an issue within your team if you are constantly actually being challenged on the decision taken. Because that could have two potential scenarios. On one hand, this could be because the other person who actually questions your decision is actually questioning your leadership role in the first place. That can actually be pretty damaging to your team, because in many cases that could mean that that person is constantly going to work behind your back and actually firing up others about that the decision is wrong and that it will actually show, and that if they would have been involved, it would have been a different decision, and so forth. I just had exactly that case at a larger US customer about a week or two ago, where we were discussing some serious decision on how they are going to go into a long-term contract. And you could see that the leadership team was actually influenced by people who were actually of a different opinion on what the leadership team should have actually done in the first place. And so as you're actually looking at your team, it's not only important that you're actually reviewing decisions and actually taking decisions and then own the decision, it's also important to identify people who are not with you on that decision. I'm not saying that this should lead, that you should potentially fire them or have any other consequences for them. You should clearly have a talk with these individuals and actually sit down and say, it's like, look, what is your problem with that specific decision? Why are you not supporting the decision? We had a group discussion, we evaluated all the different options, and in the end we took, or I as the leader of that specific team, took the decision about that specific point. Why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you say something? In many cases, what you will see is that these people typically don't speak up in the meeting. They don't speak up even later to yourself. They speak up to others. And this is actually destroying a lot of team culture. And you should clean up your team. So whenever something like this happens, is directly address these people as quick as possible and have a very, very clear discussion about what is wrong with the decision from their perspective. It's not so much that you basically tell them, it's like, hey, I took the decision, you should actually follow my decision. It's more about questioning them. It's like, okay, this was the decision, we had the group discussion, so why did you not actually follow that decision? Or why are you actually working with others against the decision? Or why are you boycotting the work or doing other things from that perspective? So as we are going through all these different scenarios, be sure that you are not only taking the decision and leading with the decision, but also take very close watch out on your other people around you. So what is the positive outcomes, or what are the key takeaways of the decision-taking process, and why it's so important, especially in the current economic times? Because especially the current economic times challenge companies that you need to actually take decisions fast. And because the market is constantly changing, customers are more and more on the run. Customers are re-evaluating their vendors at a much higher pace at the moment, because they feel so much pressure like everybody else in this current economic scenario. And based on that, it's very important that you take decisions fast. Why is it important? A decision might be wrong, totally correct. Not every person's decision is perfect, but your complete team can work on that one decision. If you don't take the decision, and a good scenario is a German textile company, Trigema, and their former owner and CEO, Wolfgang Krupp, actually made this decision very, very clearly, where he said, it's like, if I'm going into my production place in the middle of the, or late at night or something else, and one of the production workers comes to me and says, like, okay, we finished step one, which t-shirt color should we produce next? And he doesn't know. He says, it's like, I'm still going to take a decision. And if I'm going to decide we are going to produce blue t-shirts next, then we are going to produce blue t-shirts. Because he says there are multiple different reasons why this is important. On one hand, actually production doesn't stop. Because if he goes back and tries to ring up 15 different people to get a decision on why exactly they should continue the production, it's going to take potentially minutes, hours, or even longer to actually get the decision. Second is, the complete people in the production facility say is like, he might be the owner and the boss, but he has absolutely no clue what's going on here, because he can't even take the most simple decisions and tell us which color to produce next. So decisions actually help you make progress. It might not always be the progress you're looking for, but you're making progress. The team is actually evolving. The team is moving forward. So it's very, very important to take that. The next part is having confidence in decision making. So the important part is you need to be very confident in the decision you take and that you're going to work with the decision. If you're weak in your decision, if you are constantly questioning your decision yourself, then you cannot actually lead the team towards the mountain or the targets you're actually aiming for. So having confidence in your decision is important. And this also means you need to have confidence in the decisions people on potentially or on teams which work towards you have. So if, let's take my role, if I, as a CEO, actually delegate the decision-taking process to, for example, Sasha, who runs our revenue process, CRO, and is responsible for sales and revenue and stuff like that, if I clearly delegate something to him and say, it's like, Sasha, that's your decision, then he should own the decision. He should be able, I mean, he can always come back to me and ask what's my opinion about it, but he can take the decision. And then I should, at any point in time, actually support the decision. If I'm then actually running around and actually questioning his decision as well, he has more or less the same problem. No one in the team will believe his decisions. He has no confidence in the decision process and everything else. So important from a leadership perspective is not only to own your decision and have confidence in your decisions, but also for the people which you put in other positions, you should have confidence in them as well, because if you don't have the confidence in there, then they will be struggling with that as well. Timely decision making. Another important part is define when you are going to take a decision. So, for example, for that conference last year, we took a clear deadline and said, it's like, I think at least 7 days before the conference, we are going to take the final trigger and we are going to take a decision at that step. So have a very, very clear timeline and don't actually deviate from that. Ownership of the decision, we talked about that. Risk awareness, this is what we said is before, is collect enough information, talk about all of these specific scenarios. And once you actually are fully aware of the risks and everything else, then take the decision and work with it. As I mentioned several times, the best examples for this are people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and many other great leaders of the last 10, 20, 30 years. One of the things which you will find, which many of them always again and again have in common, is that they are successful leaders because they take clear decisions, they stand by their decisions, and they own the decisions. And they also don't challenge anybody else's decision in the first place because they think that all of this has been basically taken out of that equation. So, if you want to learn more about that, the book is coming out tomorrow. The Leadership Navigator, main authors Tracy-Ann Palmer and Stacey Caster. Once we publish the podcast from today's session, we are also going to put in a link directly to the Amazon orders. We are aiming hard to actually hit the bestseller lists for this book within the first 7 days. So if you can support us on that one, that would definitely be great. Beside myself, there is a lengthy list of other people who actually participated in the book. You can learn in the book, for example, also about navigating change and balancing innovation, something Phil Bertolini spoke about or wrote about in the book, where it's really all about change process and innovation and how much challenges these can actually bring for a modern corporation. You learn in the book also about challenges, where navigating challenges with decisiveness by Kerry Patchler. We have a chapter about leadership challenges by themselves. We have topics about continuous growth, which is clearly something which is important, something which I was challenged in the last 2 or 3 years again and again, where people said it's like, but aren't we within ComDivision in a good position where we are? We have a constant position we have a slow growth, but that's where we are. The challenge is, and I must say by now that I can clearly say I'm lucky enough that we actually took the decision for more growth and everything else, because it puts us in a very good position for the years ahead. But that is a chapter. Leadership from a global perspective is also very interesting. It's written by Chris Perkins. I was on a podcast once with him. A very great persona. He's going to talk about the challenges you have in a global environment, something we had to come over with ComDivision as well, as we actually grown our company, not only in Germany, but in the US. By now, actually, we are running more revenue in North America than we actually are running in EMEA. We are currently building up Middle East as well. So running in different territories is clearly a challenge for companies. And so there are more and more interesting chapters. The good part is you can pick each one of these chapters individually in the book and actually adopt what you need out of it. And stay tuned. There will be more on that. And I'm going to put the link later on in the comments, and stay tuned for the book. We will have more to come because there will be seminars, podcasts, and everything else around the book soon to be released. So I hope you enjoyed the book, and I hope you enjoyed today's podcast, which was a bit off from the norm. I know that we missed some audio in the beginning on some of the streams. I hope that one of the recording catched all of them. So we will hopefully cover it from there. And I hope to see you again next week. We are going to run another episode next week of Yves Just Chatting. There will be a few shorter snippets coming up, and go from there. There are a few questions which just bubbled up, and I know that I potentially missed a few. One of them is where in the US did you is your office, and why did you choose that location? Our primary office in the US is currently in Tampa, Florida. The main reason why we did found originally in Tampa, Florida, so one of the things is with the different states in the US, you always need to look at the different models. Why did we not go with Delaware? The main reason was that back in the days, we had the advantage that we had someone who was formerly involved in our company, was also in Florida, and he helped us with the setup and everything else. And that is why we are headquartered in Tampa, Florida. But we are operating out of different states at the moment, so that is a different scenario from that perspective. If you are moving into the US, better be sure that you fully understand all the legal and tax consequences. Tax handling, HR, and everything in the US is completely different beast than it is in Europe. And as always, whether it's US, Dubai, or Middle East, or anything else, don't be fooled by the people who give you cheap advice and everything else. Invest in having good tax advisors, good legal advisors as you're setting up companies in different locations. Also to get fully the consequences. We have a different company structure set up than many other companies have picked over the years. And so from that perspective, be careful there. Yeah, okay. That's it for today. In today's episode, we are going to try to get it on the podcast as soon as possible, especially now that the book is coming out tomorrow. We hope to see you again on one of the next sessions, and stay tuned for more. And I hope you enjoyed the show today. Thank you, and have a good day.